Hello and welcome to this lecture on the electromagnetic field tensor. This lecture is a part of module 6 of your course in electrodynamics. In this lecture I shall carry the discussion forward from our earlier lecture on the Lorentz transformation, and this is the plan as to how I'll do it. So first we will have a brief recap of all the some of the important topics from the previous lectures, which will help us to carry our discussion forward. Then I shall give a brief introduction to tensors. Actually, I should not be using the word introduction because tensors could be the subject of a separate course into itself. So let me just say that then we'll have a brief clarification of what tensors are, because the topic of this lecture also it carries the word tensor. Then I'll introduce you to what is known as a forecurrent, and this will help us show that the electric charge is actually invariant. And after that we will build what is known as a force potential using the existing scalar and the vector potentials, and this will finally lead us to the electromagnetic field tensor. So now to recap some of the ideas from the earlier lessons. So we'll start discussion with the equation of continuity. We are familiar with this because this comes from the conservation of electric charge. So if you note here, I'm using small j to represent the current density. Earlier I used to use capital J, but I'm using small j here because I would like to reserve capital J as a symbol for the forecurrent. Then we have the Lorentz gauge condition. Okay, you can refer to my lecture on gauge invariance. This Lorentz gauge condition helps us to simplify the inhomogeneous potential equations and write down the inhomogeneous potential equations to be like this, which in the static case give us simply the Poisson equation. So this is known as the box operator, or it is known as the D'Alembert operator. So this D'Alembert operator, it's a four-dimensional second partial derivative operator. So it contains your xyz partial derivatives, second order xyz partial derivatives, and it contains the time derivatives as well. Okay, so it is basically dou square by dou x square plus dou square by dou y square plus dou square by dou z square minus 1 by c square dou square by dou d square. So this is the D'Alembert operator, which operates when it operates on A and phi. It gives us on the right hand side, it gives us the sources, which is j and rho. Then in the previous lecture we had learned what is the four vector. Four vector is basically you take any set of four quantities, you take any four quantities and you club them together such that these four quantities they transform under a Lorentz transformation. Okay, so this is the Lorentz transformation matrix. So if I apply the Lorentz transformation matrix on a set of such four quantities, it will give me another set, and that will be the set of such quantities in another reference frames. Okay, so if such set of four quantities satisfies the Lorentz transformation, we call it as a four vector. And one example of four vector is four velocity, which is basically it contains four components. Of course, the first three components are the same as the components of the three-dimensional velocity. We just write it as velocity v comma ic. So even though we have written it as two components, but this actually contains three components. So 3 plus 1, 4 components. So vic divided by under root 1 minus v square by c square. So now coming to what are tensors. Okay, so let's consider n-dimensional Euclidean space. Okay, it could be a three-dimensional Euclidean space. So in that case, it is going to be we write it as E3. So let's consider an n-dimensional flat space or Euclidean space. So if let's say in this space S is a frame, okay, in this Euclidean space, let's say S is one frame, and we denote the coordinates in that frame as xi. And S tilde is another frame which we denote as x tilde I. Okay, so this could be two different inertial reference frames. Then Aij are the components of an orthogonal transformation between S and S tilde. Then if I construct an object, okay, if I construct an object A which has got n components, okay, if I have construct an object having n components, okay, and these components we call them as AI in the first frame, and again another n component object which and the components are A tilde I in the S tilde frame, such that AI is equal to, it undergoes this transformation. Okay, so if this object AI and this object A tilde I they are related to each other by this transformation equation, then that object A is said to be a vector in En. So it could be a three-dimensional vector. So if we have three-dimensional Euclidean space E3, then this A is going to have three components, right? And that those three components, they are going to transform in this way. So it could be a translational, this transformation could be a translation, or it could be a rotation, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's called a vector if it transforms as a vector. But vector is a special case of tensors. A vector is basically a tensor of rank 1. Okay, so if this object, it undergoes only one transformation to go to another frame, we call it as a tensor of rank 1. Then let's say I am having another object also defined in the same Euclidean space En, and this one has got n square components. So let's say we are having three-dimensional space. Okay, so I'm having another object having 3 square, which is 9 components. Okay, so these components, I call them as Bij in S frame, and again those n square components, we call them as B tilde Bij in the S tilde frame. Then in that case, this components of this object B will undergo two transform. We'll have to undergo two transformations. Okay, if you remember, the transformation equations between these two frames are the same. So if it undergoes one transformation, it's a vector or a tensor of rank 1. But if it has to undergo two transformations, then we call it as a tensor of rank 2 in the same Euclidean space En. Likewise, if I'm having another object which has got n cube components, okay, we call it Cijk in one frame and C tilde Ijk in the other frame, such that it has to undergo three transformations. Okay, so it has to undergo three transformations, then we call it as a tensor of rank 3 in the same Euclidean space. So in the same Euclidean space, we can construct a tensor, a vector, a tensor of rank 1, a tensor of rank 2, a tensor of rank 3, and so on. So in general, any object T which is having n to the power n components, okay, n to the power n components, okay, Tijk, there is n indices in the S frame and similar components in the S tilde frame, then if it undergoes n such transformations, then we call it as a tensor of rank n in En. Okay, so this is a tensor of rank 1, so it undergoes a transformation. But what about tensors of rank 0? So if you go backwards, a tensor of rank 0, okay, when you undergo transformation from one frame to another frame, it does not change. So it's basically scalars. Scalars are those which do not undergo any transformation when you go from one frame to another frame. So tensors of rank 0, okay, so they are known as invariants because they don't change from one frame to another frame. Now this vector or tensor of rank 1, because it has got n components, we can write it as an array, right? We could write it as a single row or a single column. Tensor of rank 2, okay, because it has got n square components, we can write it as a matrix. So this is the key takeaway point that you should have. A tensor of rank 2, we can represent it, or you can take the components of this and you can represent this as a matrix. So now coming to fork current. Okay, so in an inertial frame, for a current density, for a charge density rho which is moving with a velocity v, the current density is related to the charge density and velocity as J is equal to rho into v. We had already discussed that in our lecture on magnetostatics. So the equation of continuity is basically this. So now we insert equation 1 in equation number 2. So when you do that, so we'll have divergence of, instead of J, we'll have divergence of rho times v plus dou rho by dou t. So now we just expand the first term. The first term, when you expand this, because rho is a scalar, only v is a vector, so we will have three components, vx, vy, and vz. And when you take the divergence, it will become rho vx by dou rho vx by dou x, dou rho vy by dou y, dou rho vz by dou z, and of course dou rho by dou t. I multiply and divide this by this term. I will multiply and divide by IC. So as a result, what this IC will go inside the differential in the denominator, so it will become dou ICT, which is not an issue because IC is anyway a constant, and in the numerator we have a differentiation of IC rho, which is equal to 0, of course. So this is what we have. So now we'll just rewrite this. So x, if you remember the Minkowski spacetime, x we write it as x1, y we write it as x2, and z we write it as x3, and ICT we define as a fourth coordinate in Minkowski spacetime, which is x4. Okay, so this is what we have. So now what we do is we define the 4 current in this way. So 4 current is basically defined as rho into under root 1 minus v square by c square times, if you recall, this is the 4 velocity. Okay, so rho times under root 1 minus v square by c square into the 4 velocity. Okay, so you can see the definition is very similar to the definition of the current density in 3-dimensional case. In the 3-dimensional case, it is J equal to rho into V. So here also J is equal to rho into V, but of course there is going to be this factor of 1 minus V square by C square due to relativity. So now what is V? V is equal to this 4 velocity is nothing but V 3-dimensional velocity comma IC divided by under root 1 minus V square by C square. So under root 1 minus V square by C square into 4 velocity is nothing but V comma IC. So we multiply this rho, so we'll get rho V comma rho IC. Rho V is nothing but J. So J 4 current is simply it will be a object having 4 components. The first 3 components are same as the 3-dimensional current density, and the last component will be simply IC rho. So expanding this out, this is what we have. So this equation number 3, we can simply write it like this. This particular equation, we can write it like this, because you can see here the first component is rho Vx. Rho Vx, what is rho Vx? Rho Vx is the first component of J. So rho Vx is nothing but J1, right? And divided by, so dou J1 by dou x1. This is J2, so dou J2 by dou x2. This is dou J3 by dou x3. This is dou J4, if you see here, this is J4, dou J4 by dou x4. So this equation number 3, we can simply write it like this, of course, or we could write it like this, Ji comma I, which is equal to 0. So here, of course, I have used some conventions. In writing this, we have used in writing this expression, we have used what is known as the Einstein summation convention. That is, if a term has got a repeated index, it implies that there is a summation over that index. So over here, we have dou Ji by dou xi. So here I is repeated. In this same term, I is repeated. So this implies that we are actually summing over I. So we'll make I take. So in this case, I is known as a dummy variable, dummy index, and we make this I take all possible values. So here, what are the possible values? Because we are in 4-dimensional space, so the value of that, the values that I can take is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I will take all possible values and will have a summation. So this actually means summation. So dou Ji by dou xi is actually, it is equal to dou J1 by dou x1 plus dou J2 by dou x2 plus dou J3 by dou x3 plus dou J4 by dou x4, which are basically these 4 terms. So we are able to write these large equation. We are able to write this in a simple way like this. And we can simplify this even further by using this notation. So here what it means is, in the subscript, if I use a comma I, okay, in the subscript if I use a comma I, it means we are partially differentiating this quantity, okay, with respect to xi. Okay, so if I say Ji comma I, it means, this basically means dou Ji by dou xi. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just hiding this entire thing. So this dou by dou x is actually understood because there is a comma here. Okay, so we just write Ji comma I. So moment you see a comma I, it means we are differentiating this Ji. Okay, Ji comma I, it means we are differentiating Ji with respect to xi, which is exactly what we are doing over here. So in this way, we can write these equations in a much more compact and elegant way. So equation 5 is the 4-vector representation. This equation, either this or this, is the 4-vector representation of the equation of continuity. That is, this equation of continuity, we are able to write down in a much more succinct form like this. Okay, provided of course rho into root over 1 minus v square by c square is invariant, which obviously it will be, as we will show here. So let us say that rho naught is equal to rho into under root 1 minus v square by c square. We'll show that the electric charges, basically it remains invariant. So rho naught is equal to rho under root 1 minus v square by c square. So when v is equal to 0, rho is equal to rho naught, so we can call rho naught as the rest charge density or the proper charge density. So let's consider 2 reference frames, S and S tilde, where S tilde is moving with a velocity v with respect to the stationary frame S. So if I have, let's say, some kind of a charge distribution, over here, okay, let's say we have a charge distribution which is distributed over a cuboid, Okay, so I have a charge distribution which is distributed over a cuboid, and I want to measure the charge inside this distribution with respect to this frame S and with respect to this frame S tilde. So how do we measure that? We will measure the charge density in with respect to both the frames. Okay, so once we get the charge density between both frames, then all you have to do is just multiply with the volume of that cuboid. That is going to give us the total charge. So let's say we want to find out the volume measured with respect to this stationary frame S. Okay, so how do you find out volume? Very simple. So A is the area of cross section and delta X is the length. So all you have to do is just multiply the area with the length. Okay, so that is going to give us the volume in the stationary frame, volume measured with respect to the stationary frame. So that volume will be equal to A delta X. So now with respect to the moving frame, okay, this S tilde is moving with respect to the stationary frame. That means with respect to the S tilde frame, this cuboid is actually moving in the opposite direction. So here the area of cross section again is A, but this time the length will not be delta X here, the length will be delta X tilde. Okay, so therefore the volume measured in the moving frame will be equal to V delta V tilde, which is equal to A delta X tilde. By Lorentz contraction, there is going to be obviously these two volumes will not be the same. Delta V and delta V tilde will not be the same because of Lorentz contraction, because this is a moving frame, so it is going to observe a length which is smaller. With respect to this frame, it will observe a length which is actually been contracted by the Lorentz contraction. So that contracted length delta X tilde will be equal to under root 1 minus V square by C square into delta X. So rho naught is this, and then delta X tilde will be basically this. Now we just take this equation and we just multiply both sides with A. So A delta X tilde is equal to under root 1 minus V square by C square A into delta X. So this gives us the volume in the stationary frame, and this gives the volume, this gives us the volume with respect measured with respect to the moving frame. This gives us the volume measured with respect to the stationary frame. So delta V tilde is equal to under root 1 minus V square by C square into delta V. So what is the charge contained within the volume that is measured with respect to the stationary frame? The charge contained will be equal to the rest charge density times the volume measured with respect to the rest frame, which is rho naught into delta V. The charge contained within the volume as measured with respect to moving frame, so which is Q delta, which is equal to rho into delta V tilde. Now delta V tilde we just replace from here, so we'll have root over 1 minus V square by C square into delta V. This is using equation number 2 here, and then we combine these two, rho and this, and when you combine these two from equation number 1, this will give us rho naught. Okay, so now Q is rho naught delta V, and Q tilde is also rho naught into delta V. That means Q tilde must be equal to Q. That means the charge remains, electric charge remains invariant across all inertial reference frames. Okay, so now this brings us to the 4 potential. So now the Lorentz transformations were first noticed to be transformations that leave Maxwell's equations covariant in form. Okay, you might come across this term, the equations remaining covariant in form. Basically, when we say equations are remain covariant in form, so what we mean is when the equations, they preserve their form. Okay, the way these equations look, where the different terms of the equations, where are they placed. So when the equations, they preserve their form, when you are making them, when you undergo a transformation from one frame to frame to another frame, then we say that those equations, they are covariant in form with respect to that transformation. So I have a transformation, and this transformation, when you make it undergo, okay, from one frame to when you make one frame undergo the transform to another frame, then the equations, okay, if the form of those equations remain the same in both the frames, then we say that these equations are covariant in form. And the Maxwell's equations, they were found to be covariant in form with respect to the Lorentz transformation. So the Lorentz gauge condition, we'll use the Lorentz gauge condition because it places both the vector potential as this and the scalar potential on equal footing. So the Lorentz gauge condition is this, so which simplifies the inhomogeneous potential equations, and we are able to write them in this form. So what we do is, we define the 4 potential in this way. Okay, 4 potential, remember 4 potential, it has to have 4 components. So we have a vector potential and a scalar potential. The vector potential is, it's a vector, so it has got 3 components. Scalar potential only 1 component, so 3 plus 1 we have 4 components. So this is how we construct them. So what we do is, the 4 potential omega, we write it as first 3 components same as the vector potential, and the last component we'll get it from the scalar potential, and we write it as I phi by c. So this is our 4 potential. So what we do is, we apply the D'Alembert operator on the 4 potentials. So D'Alembert of omega will be equal to D'Alembert A, okay, applying on A comma I phi by c. So we now take this D'Alembert operator inside. So it applies separately to A and it applies separately to phi, and we already know when the D'Alembert operator operates on A and it operates on phi, we already know what will happen. When it operates on A, it will give us minus mu naught j. When it operates on phi, it will give us minus rho by epsilon naught, because we are in the Lorentz gauge condition. And so we write this as minus mu naught j, and I by c is there, and this is going to give us minus rho by epsilon naught. So we take the minus sign outside, so we have mu naught j. So now what we do is, we have this epsilon naught, right? So this epsilon naught, 1 by epsilon naught is equal to 1 by mu naught into c square. So 1 by epsilon naught is equal to mu naught into c square. So that's how we make this replacement. So if I take this mu naught from both the terms, we take it outside, then we'll be left with j comma I. The c, one of the c will get cancelled, so only a c is going to remain. So mu naught, when it goes outside, what will be left behind is IC into rho. Okay, so minus mu naught j comma IC into rho. So this we remember, right? Because j comma IC rho, what is it? It is our 4 current. Okay, so the D'Alembert of the 4 potential is equal to mu naught, mu naught times the 4 current. Okay, so D'Alembert of A is equal to minus mu naught j, D'Alembert of phi is equal to minus rho by epsilon naught, and D'Alembert of omega is equal to minus mu naught into j. So equation 1 and 2, okay, these two equations are together. Okay, we could say that together we could combine these two equations, and we could write them equivalently in this form, because if you take them component wise, take the first 3 components together, you will get this equation. Take the last component of this equation, you will get this equation number 2. So now we can write the Laplacian, we can write down the D'Alembert operator like this. We know what the D'Alembert operator is. Okay, it has got, first of all, it has got a Laplacian is dou square by dou x square plus dou square by dou y square plus dou square by dou z square, and it has got a second time derivative, so minus 1 by c square dou square by dou t square. So what I do here is, this I can write this as, this last term I can write this as dou of IC t square. You can see how this works, because IC, it's anyway constant, so when I take this out, we'll get I square c square. There's a plus sign here, I square. Okay, I square is going to give us this minus sign. Okay, and there is going to be that c square. So again, what will be left behind is dou square by dou t square. So these two are equivalent. So minus 1 by c square dou square by dou t square is the same as dou square by dou ICT square. Okay, and now we already know what this is, because x is nothing but x1, y is nothing but x2, z is nothing but x3, and ICT is nothing but x4. Okay, so we can write down the D'Alembert operator as dou square by dou xi dou xi. Okay, I'm using the Einstein summation convention. We have the same index. Okay, we have a repeated index, so I is the dummy index. So what we have is, it's understood that there is a summation. So there is a dou square by dou x1, which is dou square by dou x1 square, and so on. Then equation number 4. Okay, this is how we write down this. Then equation number 4 can be written in component form like this, right? Because omega, it's ith component. Okay, what are we doing here? We are taking, when I write omega I comma jj, what are we basically doing? We are basically differentiating this omega with respect to this. So omega I jj is nothing but dou omega I by dou xj. Okay, and because this is a repeated index, so it is going to be a summation, which is implied over here, minus mu naught ji. Okay, so this equation can be written in component form like this. So I leave this to you to verify. Just expand this, and you find that, expand this and you expand this, and you'll find out that both of them are going to be just same. So please do this as an exercise at home. So we can say that this equation, okay, equation number 5, it contains all the information from the Maxwell's equations, because if you remember these two equations, where did we get it? Ultimately we got them, we distilled these two equations from the Maxwell's, right from the Maxwell's equations itself. Okay, so these two equations, since we have got from the Maxwell's equations and we have combined these two equations into this equation, so this equation contains all the information that we require from the Maxwell's equations. So we have this equation which represents the Maxwell's equations, the information from them. It's not exactly the Maxwell's equations, it's the information from the Maxwell's equation. And we can see that the Lorentz gauge condition is inbuilt into the definition of omega, and we can write down the Lorentz gauge condition like this. Okay, the Lorentz gauge condition can be equivalently written in this form, that is omega I comma I is equal to 0. Okay, so I'm actually leaving this to you as an exercise for you to do at home. Just verify if this is indeed true. Okay, if the Lorentz condition can be written like this, all you have to do is just expand this. Okay, because there is a repeated index, so you have to basically expand this and then collect the different terms. Okay, substitute the values of the components of the 4 potential. You'll find that you'll be actually getting the Lorentz gauge condition also here. So given any 4 current J, so if you give me a 4 current, that is, you give me the components of small j and you give me rho. Okay, so if you know J and rho, you can determine the potential completely from these two equations, equations 5 and 6. Solving these two equations, you can completely find out the potential. So now coming to the electromagnetic field tensor. Okay, so now when the potentials are known in any inertial reference frame, the fields can be obtained like this. Okay, like I said again, I keep on repeating this quite often. We are the potentials are there basically mathematical constructs. They are not real entities, real physical entities. The real physical entities are the electric and the magnetic fields. Okay, these are the quantities that we can actually take an instrument, and these are the quantities that we can actually measure. Charges, they respond to the fields. Okay, so potentials, they are basically mathematical constructs which we have devised in order to simplify the problem and in order to improve our understanding of the problem. So when the potentials are known, okay, in an inertial reference frame, the fields can be obtained like this. The fields E and B can be obtained in terms of the potentials in this form, in this way. So let us consider the first equation. Okay, E equal to minus gradient phi minus dou A by dou T. So we'll just expand both sides. So E is Ex I cap plus Ey j cap plus Ez k cap. I have expanded this. And gradient of phi is, we have a minus sign. Gradient of phi is dou phi by dou x I cap plus dou phi by dou y j cap plus dou phi by dou z k cap. And dou A by dou T, this is A, we write it as Ax I cap plus Ay j cap plus Az k cap, and all of these components we differentiate with respect to time. So dou Ax by dou T I cap plus dou Ay by dou T j cap. This is j cap. Okay, please read this as j cap, and this is k cap. And dou Az by dou T, which is into k cap. Okay, please read this. This was a mistake. This is what happens when you copy and paste in LaTeX. Okay, so this is j cap and this is k cap. So I combine this I cap terms, j cap terms and k cap terms. So this term and this term, we combine them together. We write like this. This term and this term we combine together. This term and this term we combine them together and write it like this. So now let's recall. Okay, some time back I introduced you the fourth potential. The fourth component of the fourth potential is basically I phi by C. So we can write phi in terms of the fourth component of the fourth potential as C by I omega 4. In a similar way, of course, in the previous lesson I had shown you x4 is ICT. That means time can be written as x4 by ICT. Okay, and this is where we had stopped. Okay, the previous slide. So this is basically the expansion of E equal to minus grad phi minus dou A by dou T. Okay, so we have just expanded this and we have collected the the x component, y component and the z components on both sides. So now we'll just compare these components. That means Ex I cap and this into I cap. That means Ex must be equal to this entire thing. So Ex must be equal to minus dou phi by dou x minus dou Ax by dou T. So Ex must be equal to this. So now what we do is phi. Okay, phi is equal to C by I omega 4. So we just substitute here. Phi is equal to C by I omega 4. and dou x is nothing but x1 minus, okay, ax, what is t is equal to x4 by ic. So here we will put a x4 and in the numerator we will get an ic, so ic, okay, so ic dou omega 1 by dou x4. Okay, so now I take this, because here it is c by I and here it is ic, so I take the I into the denominator, and the moment I take this I into the denominator, so I should get another extra minus sign. That minus and this minus will together give me a plus sign. So minus c by I dou omega 4 by dou x1 plus c by I dou omega 1 by dou x4. Of course, now we can write this in our comma subscript notations, right? Because dou omega 4 by dou x1 is nothing but omega 4 comma 1. Okay, so I take this minus c by I bring it to the other side, and I get minus I by c into ex is equal to dou x4 by dou x1 dou omega 4 by dou x1, which is equal to omega 4 comma 1, and here it will become omega 1 comma 4. Okay, so this is the I'm just using that shortcut notation of writing the partial derivatives. So omega 4 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 4. So we call this as equation number 4. Okay, in a similar manner we can by equating the other two components, the y component and the z component, in equation number 3, in this equation the y and z component, and proceeding in the same steps like this, we can show that the y component of electric field and the z component of electric field can be written in terms of the differences between the derivatives of the four potential components. Okay, so I'll leave these to verify to you as a exercise at home to verify that these two actually hold good. Okay, now coming to the next equation. This is using the equation for finding the electric field using the potentials. Now finding a magnetic field using the vector potential. B is equal to curl of A. Okay, so here we will just make this expand. We'll just expand this. On the left hand side we have bx I cap plus by j cap plus bz k cap, and curl of A we can write this in the form of the determinant of this particular matrix. So we compare the components. So what is bx I cap? Bx, that is the x component, will be equal to I cap times whatever is left. So dou az by dou y minus dou ay by dou z. Okay, dou az by dou y minus dou ay by dou z. So this is very simple. What is az? Okay, the four potential, the first three components are the same as the components of A. So az will be the third component of the four potential, which is omega 3. Y is the second Minkowski space-time coordinate, so x2, and dou ay is the second component of the four potential, so omega 2 here, and z is the third Minkowski space-time coordinate, so x3. So again we can write this using our comma notation. So dou omega 3 by dou x2 is nothing but omega 3 comma 2, and dou omega 2 by dou x3 is nothing but omega 2 comma 3. So bx is equal to omega 3 comma 2 minus omega 2 comma 3. Call this equation number 7. So this is equation number 7. In a similar way, okay, the y and the z components, you just have to equate the y and the z components from this equation, and following the same steps as here, we can obtain these two equations. This again I'm leaving it to you as a home assignment for you to verify. Okay, so this is what, so here we have it. Okay, so we have already derived this, and now we have derived this. So these three equations, they give us how the components of the electric fields, okay, Ex, Ey, Ez, the components of the electric field, how they are related to the derivatives of the components of the four potential. Okay, derivatives of the components of the four potential, the difference between the derivatives of the components of the four potential, how they are related to the electric field, and the same way the difference between the components of the derivatives of the four potential, how they are related to the magnetic field. So we have three electric field components, and we have three magnetic field components. So these three and these three will give us total of 6 components. Okay, 4 potential. Okay, how many components does it have? It's a rank 2 tensor in 4-dimensional space. Rank 2 tensor in 4-dimensional space. So number of dimensions is 4, and the rank is 2. Okay, so the number of components of omega will be 4 square, which is 16. Okay, you can just go back to that first slide on tensors and you can figure this out. So the number of components of omega will be 16. Okay, but how many components do we have here? We have, in this case, we have 6 components. So how do you get 6 components out of 16? What we can do is we need basically a skew symmetric matrix. Okay, a skew symmetric tensor. So what the skew symmetric tensor is going to do is we are going to have this skew symmetric. In this skew symmetric tensor, we'll have diagonal elements if they're 0. Okay, just imagine a 4 cross 4 matrix. Okay, imagine a 4 cross 4 matrix. In this 4 cross 4 matrix, we'll have 16 components. Okay, because we are talking about a rank 2 tensor. Rank 2 tensor. Okay, in 4-dimensional space, it will have 16 components. But we don't want 16 components. We want only 6 components out of 16. So how do you reduce 6 components into 16 components? So one way to do that would be we could have a skew symmetric tensor, because a skew symmetric tensor, if you remember, a rank 2 tensor can be represented as a matrix. So a skew symmetric matrix, if you remember, if you take the transpose, it will give us the negative of that matrix. Okay, so we should have 16. So if we make a skew symmetric tensor, its diagonal elements will always be 0. Okay, so if its diagonal elements are 0, it's a that means 4 diagonal elements are 0. So out of 16 minus 4, okay, this will give you 12 components which are going to be non-zero. Okay, so out of this 12, 6 will be in the upper diagonal, upper triangle, and the remaining 6 will be in the lower triangle. Okay, so what we'll do is we will make these two, if we can make these two negatives of each other. Okay, so effectively what it means is we are having only 6 components, because the upper triangle, whatever components are there, the lower triangle is just the negative of that. Okay, so we can have 6 unique components in this way. So from 16 we can come down to 6 unique components like that. Okay, so basically we require a skew symmetric matrix. Okay, so let's see how we can construct this skew symmetric matrix. So remember, here we are using, to obtain these components, we are using this we are differentiating the components of the 4 potential with respect to the Minkowski space-time coordinates. Okay, and there is a theorem in tensor analysis. Whenever you differentiate like this, you are actually raising the tensor by rank 1. Okay, so this omega, it's a vector. Okay, omega it's a 4 potential, so it's a vector. It has got only 4 components in 4-dimensional space, so it's a vector. That means a tensor of rank 1, and when you differentiate this, you get a tensor of rank 2. So omega 4 comma 3, okay, it's basically omega I comma j is basically a tensor of rank 2. So this is a tensor of rank 2. Okay, this is rank 2 tensor, omega I comma j. Okay, so it is omega 1 comma 1, omega 1 comma 2, omega 1 comma 3, 1 comma 4, and so on. So we get 16 components over here. Now what we'll do is we will transpose it. Okay, we'll transpose it. Instead of omega I comma j, we'll say omega j comma I. So it will be just this matrix. You just take a transpose over here. Okay, this is what we have. Now what we do is we take the difference, omega j comma I minus omega I comma j. Okay, this is going to be skew symmetric. Okay, as you can see here, omega j comma I minus omega I comma j, it's going to give us this tensor, which is going to be skew symmetric, because along the diagonal we have omega 1 comma 1, omega 2 comma 2, omega 3 comma 3, omega 4 comma 4. Same thing here. So when you subtract from this, when you subtract this, the diagonal elements will go to 0. So which will leave us, so out of 16 minus 4, which is going to leave us the remaining 12 non-zero components. And out of this remaining 12 non-zero components, say for example we take this component, this is going to be omega 2 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 2. Similarly, here is going to be omega 1 comma 2 minus omega 2 comma 1. That means this component and this component, they are basically negatives of each other. So essentially these two are same components. They are not unique. They are these two components, they are not distinct from each other. They are just the same. You can get one component from the other. In other words, these two components, they are not linearly independent. So the only linearly independent components will be these 6 components or these 6 components. So if you know the components in the upper triangle, or if you know the components in the lower triangle, you can find out what the other components are. So we have 1 2 3 4 5 6. So that gives us 6 components. And as you can see from here, from the difference between these components, we get the 6 electric and magnetic field components. So it's just a matter of placing the electric and magnetic field components in their respective positions in this particular matrix. Okay, so this is what we have. Okay, so this is what we got. from the definition of the from how the writing down the electric field in terms of the scalar and the vector potentials. There's minus grad phi minus 2I by dou t. From here we got these equations, and these equations we got from B equal to curl of A. Okay, so now it's just a matter of placing them. So first what we have omega 2 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 2. So we'll just search here. Where is omega 2 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 2? We find it over here. Omega 2 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 2. Okay, so that means this quantity is nothing but Bz. Okay, Bz comes over here. Omega 3 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 3. So where is omega 3 comma 1? Okay, we have here omega 1 comma 3 minus omega 3 comma 1. Okay, and here it is omega 3 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 3. That means this component must be minus By. Okay, so Bz minus By. Similarly, we have omega 4 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 4. What is this quantity? Omega 4 comma 1 minus omega 1 comma 4. They are the same. So that means this must be equal to minus Iex by C. So this is Bz. This is minus By minus, this is minus Iex by C. So we do the same thing for all the other components, and this is what we will get. Okay, so you can verify, okay, one by one, please verify this at home, whether all the components are basically the same as we had mentioned over here. And you can see here this is a skew symmetric matrix, because if this Bz here, this is minus Bz. If this is minus By, this is By. They're negatives of each other. This is Bx, this is minus Bx. Okay, this is minus Iex by C, this is plus Iex by C. This is minus Iey by C, this is plus Iey by C. And finally this is minus Iez by C, this is Iez by C. This is a skew symmetric matrix. Okay, this is a 16 element 4 cross 4 skew symmetric matrix. That means it has got only 6 components, and these 6 components are the electric components of the electric and the magnetic fields. Okay, so we can say that the 6 components of the vectors, that is electric field vector and a magnetic field vector, these constitute the 6 non-zero components of this skew symmetric tensor. Okay, and this skew symmetric tensor, that is omega j comma I minus omega I comma j, we write it as Fij, and we can say that these 6 equations, we can summarize them. Okay, these 6 vector component equations, we can summarize them with a single tensor equation. Okay, Fij is equal to omega j comma I minus omega I comma j, and this Fij is what we call as the electromagnetic field tensor. Okay, so this is basically the things which I had left you all for you all to try at home. Okay, as an exercise, please do this at home. So this is basically the summary of what we had done so far in this lesson. So we had defined what is the four currents, basically first 3 components same as the 3-dimensional current, and the last component will be IC rho. The 4 potential is the first 3 components same as the vector potential, and the last component comes from the scalar potential. Equation of continuity can be written in terms of the 4 current, that is j I comma I is 0. Okay, if you take this j, differentiate it with respect to I, and keep the this indices the same, you will basically get the equation of continuity. Lorentz gauge condition, okay, omega I comma I is 0. So you can see here j is defined this way, j I comma I will give us equation of continuity. Omega is defined this way, omega I comma I will give us the Lorentz gauge condition. So one of this gives us the equation of continuity, and this gives us the Lorentz gauge condition. The inhomogeneous potential equations can be written like this: omega I comma j j is equal to minus mu naught ji. This is the inhomogeneous potential equations, which contains all the information from the Maxwell's equations. The electromagnetic field tensor, okay, in terms of the 4 potential, we can write down the electromagnetic field tensor like this. Okay, so electromagnetic field tensor is omega j comma I minus omega I comma j. So that gives us the Ij component of the electromagnetic field tensor, and the electromagnetic field tensor, its components are like this. So this is what we have here. So what does the electromagnetic field tensor contain? It contains the components of the electric field and the magnetic field. It's a skew symmetric matrix which contains the components of the electric field and the magnetic field. Okay, and this component, so it means you read it like this: this on the left hand side we have components of electric and magnetic fields, and on the right hand side what we have derivatives of the potentials. So basically what you are saying is components of electric and magnetic fields are equal to the difference between derivatives of the potentials. Okay, so that's how you can read this equation. So it relates the fields with the potential. So it relates the fields with the potentials, and the potential it gives us from the sources, that is from the charges and the currents we can get the potential. From the charges and the currents we get the potential, and from the potential we get the fields. Okay, so it's kind of summarizes our electromagnetic theory, but we are actually not done here, because here what we have done, our ultimate aim is to find out the fields. If you know the currents and the charges, if you know the currents and the charges, we should be able to find out the fields. So here actually we are not directly finding the fields from the charges and the currents. We are using, in between we have the potential. Okay, so you know the potentials, you know the charges and the currents, you find out the potentials. You know the potentials, you find out the fields. So we are not directly going from the charges and the currents to the fields. We are from charges and currents we are getting the potentials, and from potential we are going to the fields. Okay, so this is what we have done in this lecture. In the next lecture, which will be the last lecture on this lesson, what we will do is we will directly write down the fields, that is the components of the electromagnetic field tensor, in terms of the charges and the currents. Okay, basically we will be writing the Maxwell's equations. Using the electromagnetic field tensor, we will be writing the Maxwell's equations. So it turns out that there are two equations. The four Maxwell's equations can be simply boiled down into two equations in terms of the electromagnetic field tensor, which will contain all the information, and which will be actually the Maxwell's equations itself. Okay, so with this we come to the end of this lecture. So I suggest that you go through this particular topic which is given in this Griffiths. Okay, I think I had forgotten to mention. Okay, my mistake here. This should not be classical electrodynamics. This should not be J.D. Jackson. I did not refer to Jackson for this lesson. I have referred to Griffiths and Loudon for this particular lecture. So there's a small mistake. I'll make this correction here. Please read this as I have not used J.D. Jackson. I have used Griffiths here. Okay, so I suggest that you go through Griffiths the way Griffiths has derived this. My derivation is different from Griffiths, because in Griffiths what they did was they did not here I have used the potentials. Okay, I had used the potentials and the equations that we had already obtained. Using that I had derived the electromagnetic field tensor, whereas in Griffiths he used the Lorentz transformation. He used the Lorentz transformation, transforms from one frame to another frame, and obtains the field tensor. Okay, by deducing that this field tensor should have certain properties, and using that he has derived the field tensor. So these two derivations are slightly different. These are different from each other. Also, one more difference that you will find when you refer to Griffiths is the way this field tensor looks like. They are not arranged in the same way. And the reason for that is, in Griffiths, the Minkowski space-time components, they are defined in a different way. I have defined x1, x2, x3, and x4. x1, x2, x3 is xyz, and x4 is ICT. Okay, but in Griffiths, he has used x0, x1, x2, x3, four components, but time component, here I have put the time component at the end. First the space components x1, x2, x3, and the time component at the end. In Griffiths the time component is placed below. We call it as x0, x1, x2, x3. Okay, so and x0 is called as it is called as CT. Okay, there is no I quantity over here. Okay, but I have used ICT, so that's why you will find some small difference in the that means, for example, you will not get these okay, you will not get these I's in these terms in the field tensor that you will obtain in Griffiths. So please do the problems, verify them whether these are indeed the case. Okay, verify these and refer to Griffiths, and you can go through these interesting articles which are in Wikipedia on 4 current, 4 potential, and the electromagnetic tensor. So with this we come to the end of this lecture. Thank you.